The mist curled low across the village streets, muffling the clatter of carriage wheels as Amelia Harrington pressed her forehead against the cold windowpane. She watched Ashbourne Manor shrink behind her, its towering gables vanishing into the swirling grey. Beside her, Oliver Harrington sat in silence, his expression unreadable under the brim of his dark hat. They were on their way to see Mr. Sutton, the family solicitor, a man as old and creased as the ledgers he kept. Their father, Lord Harrington, had died scarcely a fortnight ago, leaving behind a fortune, and a house filled with secrets. Amelia shivered, feeling not the chill of the weather, but the unease curling in her chest. Something about all of this felt wrong. Their father had been in good health, hale enough to ride his horse across the fields only days before his sudden collapse. The doctors muttered vague explanations, but no real answers came. The carriage jolted to a halt outside a narrow brick building. Mr. Sutton's office stood squat and lonely between shuttered shops, its windows darkened by dust. Oliver stepped down first, then offered his hand to Amelia. Inside, the office smelled of damp paper and old wood. Mr. Sutton rose stiffly from behind his desk, his spectacles glinting in the dim light. "Master Oliver. Miss Amelia. Please sit." They obeyed. Mr. Sutton opened a heavy folder and adjusted his glasses. His voice was thin, almost apologetic. "Your father's will has been altered. Recently. Very recently." Amelia caught Oliver's eye, but he gave nothing away. "To whom is the estate left?" Oliver asked, his tone cool. Mr. Sutton hesitated, glancing between them. He cleared his throat. "To an heir. A Harrington by blood, but not either of you." The silence that followed was deafening. Amelia's heart hammered in her ears. "There must be some mistake," she whispered. Mr. Sutton shook his head gravely. "The instructions are clear. Ashbourne Manor, the estate, the entirety of the fortune, all are to be passed to the rightful heir. When found." "When found," Oliver echoed, his voice sharp. "Yes," Mr. Sutton said. "Because they are missing." A heavy weight settled in Amelia's stomach. An heir they had never heard of. A missing figure. A fortune left adrift. None of it made sense. As they left the office, the mist seemed thicker, almost alive, curling around Amelia's ankles as if urging her back towards the secrets they were leaving behind. That night, as she lay awake in her bed at Ashbourne Manor, Amelia thought she heard soft footsteps outside her door. When she rose to check, there was nothing but silence, and the unmistakable scent of her father's cologne lingering in the hallway. Something was very, very wrong. Ashbourne Manor was not finished with them yet. The next morning, Ashbourne Manor awoke under a sky of thick, bruised clouds. Rain tapped steadily against the windows as Amelia wandered the silent halls. She had not mentioned the strange footsteps to Oliver. Something inside her warned against it. Instead, she moved quietly, ears pricked for any whisper of movement. Her feet led her to the library, her father's favorite room. The scent of leather and aged paper wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. Shelves of books loomed from floor to ceiling, interrupted only by dark oak panels carved with the Harrington crest. Amelia trailed her fingers along the spines of ancient volumes. Many were histories of the estate, records of lineage and property. Yet today something felt different. A slight chill in the air. A book that lay oddly ajar on a reading table, its pages fluttering although no breeze stirred. She approached it. The book was a ledger, handwritten, with names and dates that seemed to stretch back centuries. Her eyes caught on a name she did not recognize. Eliza Harrington. Born 1783. Died. No date recorded. Curious, Amelia flipped through the pages. More entries followed. References to a daughter hidden away, a scandal quietly buried. Suddenly, a low thud echoed behind her. Spinning around, Amelia saw nothing but a shifting shadow near the towering shelves. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She hesitated only a moment before creeping toward the spot where the shadow had vanished. Behind one of the tall bookcases, she discovered something extraordinary. A small, almost invisible door, sunken into the woodwork. Hands trembling, she pressed against it. It yielded with a soft groan. A hidden passage. Cool, damp air rushed out to meet her, carrying the scent of earth and stone. She peered inside, but darkness swallowed everything beyond a few feet. "Amelia!" Oliver's voice rang out from across the library. Startled, she let the door fall shut. She smoothed her skirts quickly and turned to see her brother striding towards her. "There you are," he said, frowning. "I have been searching everywhere. Come. We must speak." He said nothing about the door. Amelia said nothing about the shadow. Yet as they left the library, Amelia glanced back once. The door stood flush with the wall once more, utterly invisible, but she could have sworn she felt eyes watching her from the darkness beyond. Oliver led Amelia to the drawing room, where a fire crackled weakly in the hearth. He shut the heavy door behind them, casting a wary glance toward the corridor. For a moment, neither spoke. Rain pattered against the high windows, the only sound filling the room. "Something is wrong with this house," Oliver said finally, his voice low. "Have you not felt it?" Amelia hesitated. She thought of the footsteps, the shadow, the hidden door. She nodded. Father's death had not been the end of their troubles. It was only the beginning. Oliver paced before the fireplace, running a hand through his hair. "I overheard the groundskeeper speaking this morning. They say father was afraid. In his last days, he barely slept. He spoke of voices calling from the West Wing." Amelia's stomach turned cold. The West Wing had been abandoned for decades after a fire gutted half its rooms. No one lived there now. No one was meant to. "I went there," Oliver continued, lowering his voice further. "Last night. I heard it too." A log shifted in the fire, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. Amelia shivered despite the warmth. "What did you hear?" she whispered. Oliver's face tightened. "Weeping. A woman's weeping." The fire popped sharply, as if in response. For a moment, Amelia thought she heard it too, a faint keening from somewhere deep within the house. But when she strained her ears, it was gone. "I found something else," Oliver said, retrieving a folded parchment from his coat pocket. He handed it to her. It was a map. An ancient map of Ashbourne Manor. And there, inked in the faintest lines, was a part of the house she had never seen before, a chamber hidden beneath the West Wing. A secret place. A place their father had known about. "We must find it," Oliver said grimly. "Whatever is haunting this house, it began there." As Amelia traced the lines of the map with trembling fingers, a sudden gust of wind rattled the windows violently. The fire guttered low. And for the briefest second, Amelia saw reflected in the darkened glass a woman's pale face staring back at her. But when she turned, no one was there. The next morning, a grey mist clung to the grounds of Ashbourne Manor. The world beyond the windows looked ghostly and far away. Amelia and Oliver met in the great hall, each carrying a lantern. The house seemed even quieter today, as if holding its breath. Without speaking, they crossed the corridor towards the forbidden West Wing. The door that led there was ancient oak, its iron hinges rusted with age. Oliver produced an old brass key he had found among their father's belongings. It slid into the lock with a heavy click. The air on the other side was colder, damp with the scent of soot and mold. Their lanterns barely pierced the gloom. Every step they took stirred dust from the ruined tapestries and cracked floorboards. "This place should be in ruins," Amelia whispered, voice trembling. "Yet, something keeps it standing." Oliver nodded grimly. They moved deeper into the wing, following the map's faded directions. A hallway stretched out before them, lined with portraits of ancestors long dead. Their eyes seemed to follow Amelia and Oliver with every step. At the end of the hall, a grand staircase descended into darkness. "This is it," Oliver said, voice barely above a breath. They descended carefully, the old steps creaking beneath their weight. At the bottom, a heavy stone door awaited. Strange carvings covered its surface, symbols neither of them recognized, yet both felt a deep unease staring at them. Amelia pressed her hand against the cold stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then with a low groan, the door swung inward. A tunnel stretched beyond, narrow and winding, swallowed by darkness. As they stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening bang. Their lanterns flickered, and Amelia heard it again. Soft weeping, echoing through the tunnel. Not far ahead. She gripped Oliver's hand tightly. Together, they pressed forward into the unknown. The walls of the tunnel were carved with scenes that seemed to shift and writhe in the lantern light. Shadows danced across the stone, forming shapes of twisted figures, of fires burning, of a woman standing alone in despair. At a fork in the passage, Amelia paused. The map did not show this. Two paths lay ahead, one leading downwards, into even deeper darkness, the other sloping gently upwards. A faint glimmer of light shone from the downward path. And with it a voice, calling her name. Amelia hesitated at the fork. The voice that had called her name was soft, almost gentle, but there was something underneath it, something wrong. Oliver squeezed her hand and gave a small nod. Without a word, they chose the downward path, following the faint glimmer ahead. The tunnel narrowed as they descended, forcing them to walk single file. The air grew colder still, and the walls seemed to pulse with life, as if the stones themselves were breathing. At last, the tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber. The walls were lined with tall mirrors, each one framed with black and silver. Between them stood crumbling statues, their faces twisted in expressions of terror. At the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it, a single book bound in deep crimson leather. The book seemed to throb with a heartbeat of its own. Amelia stepped closer, lantern held high. The mirrors began to ripple like disturbed water, and out of them stepped ghostly figures, thin, wraith-like, their faces hidden beneath tattered hoods. They drifted silently, circling Amelia and Oliver. Oliver moved to stand beside her. "We mustn't touch the book," he whispered urgently. "It's not meant for us." But the voice called again, closer now, almost in her ear. Amelia turned sharply. Behind her stood a woman in a long flowing black gown. Her face was hidden beneath a veil, and yet Amelia could feel the woman's gaze piercing through her very soul. "You came," the woman said, her voice like smoke. "You heard my call. Who are you?" Amelia demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman lifted her veil just enough to reveal hollow eyes, endless and dark. "I am what remains," she said. "I am bound here by blood and betrayal. And now so are you." The wraiths closed in. Oliver grabbed Amelia's arm, dragging her away from the pedestal. The figures hissed in anger, the air filling with a chilling wail. They ran, darting between the statues, mirrors distorting wildly around them. At the far end of the chamber, they spotted another door, half buried under rubble. With all their strength, they forced it open. Beyond it was a spiral staircase, climbing up into shadows. They did not look back. As they ascended, the cries of the trapped souls echoed behind them, fading only when they reached the top. Breathless, Amelia and Oliver stumbled into a new corridor, this one surprisingly clean and well-lit. The walls here were lined not with portraits, but with shelves of old books and artifacts, relics from a forgotten age. They realized they had stumbled into a part of the house unseen for centuries. And somewhere in these hidden halls, the answer to the Ashbourne curse awaited. The corridor seemed endless. Each step Amelia and Oliver took echoed down the long hallway, their lantern casting trembling shadows across the stone walls. Dust floated lazily in the air, disturbed after centuries of stillness. As they passed the towering shelves, Amelia noticed the books seemed untouched by time. Their covers, though ancient, were free from mold or decay. Symbols she could not recognize gleamed faintly on their spines. Oliver pulled a heavy tome from the shelf. As he opened it, a sharp, cold gust of wind swept through the hall, extinguishing their lantern. They were plunged into darkness. A heartbeat later, ghostly lights flickered into life along the walls, revealing faint, glowing runes. The air shimmered, and soft whispers rose around them. Not words but sighs and broken sobs. The books, it seemed, remembered. "Look!" Amelia breathed, pointing ahead. At the far end of the hall stood a massive double door, carved from dark oak and inlaid with swirling silver patterns. The design seemed to shift and move if one looked too long. They approached cautiously. As they neared, the silver swirls began to pulse in time with their footsteps, and the sobbing whispers grew louder, almost pleading. Oliver reached for the door handle. The moment his fingers brushed the silver, a thunderous boom shook the ground, and the doors swung inward with a creak that sounded like a scream. Beyond lay a circular chamber lit by an unseen light. In the center stood an ancient lectern, upon which rested a map, old, frayed, and inked with strange markings. Around the map, glass cases housed more artifacts. A cracked locket, a tarnished dagger, a single black feather. Amelia moved closer to the map. Lines drawn in blood-red ink crisscrossed the parchment, converging on one point marked with a symbol she had seen before, etched into the Ashbourne family crest. "This," Oliver whispered, This shows where the heart of the curse lies. Before Amelia could respond, the whispering grew violent, turning into screams. The walls around them shifted, the stone writhing like a living creature. A figure emerged from the shadows, a boy no older than 12, dressed in a torn velvet suit. His face was pale, his eyes hollow. "Help me," he whispered. Amelia reached out instinctively, but Oliver pulled her back. "Remember the warnings," he hissed. "Not all who seem lost can be saved." The boy's face twisted into a grotesque smile, and with a shriek, he dissolved into mist. The walls convulsed once more. The map trembled on the lectern, and a soft voice, older, wearier, echoed through the chamber. "Break the bond. Free the blood. Or be trapped forever." Amelia seized the map just as the walls began to collapse inward, 1,000 ghostly hands reaching for them. They sprinted through the door, slamming it shut behind them. For a moment, there was only silence. They had escaped, but they knew that the heart of the curse was still ahead, waiting. And they were running out of time. The map trembled in Amelia's hands as they stumbled through another crumbling hallway. The house was changing. Corridors twisted where none had been before, doors melted into solid walls, and the very air seemed to hum with unseen rage. Ashbourne Manor was alive, fighting to keep its secrets. Oliver led the way, the map their only guide, tracing a path through the labyrinth. Suddenly, they emerged into a grand hall they had never seen before. Columns lined the space, but they were cracked and leaning. The ceiling arched high overhead, lost in shadow. In the center of the hall, an enormous staircase spiraled downward, into darkness so complete that even their lantern's light was swallowed whole. The map pulsed faintly. "This is it," Amelia whispered. "The descent to the cursed heart." The first step onto the staircase felt like stepping into ice water. Each step downward made the air colder, thicker, harder to breathe. The only sounds were their labored breaths and the distant rhythmic thudding of what might have been a heartbeat. Slow, heavy, endless. Halfway down, they passed alcoves carved into the stone walls. Inside each alcove stood statues, life-sized, so detailed they seemed ready to step out of the shadows. Men, women, children, faces frozen in silent screams, arms raised in futile defense. Amelia shivered. "I think they were once alive," she murmured. Oliver nodded grimly. "The manor doesn't just trap souls. It traps flesh." They hurried downward, trying not to look too closely at the anguished figures. At the bottom of the staircase stood a single stone archway, beyond which lay a chamber glowing with a dull red light. Strange, organic shapes pulsed and writhed across the walls, as if the room itself breathed. They stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of iron and damp earth. In the center of the chamber rose a pedestal, and atop it, encased in glass, floated a small black crystal. Dark veins crawled from the pedestal across the floor, walls, and ceiling, like the roots of a poisonous tree. The heart of the curse. As they approached, the walls began to move more violently. Whispers erupted around them, thousands of voices layered atop each other. Weeping, screaming, pleading. Oliver pulled a silver dagger from his belt, the one they had found earlier in the artifact room. "It said," he rasped, "break the bond. Free the blood." Amelia nodded. She reached for the glass casing. The moment her fingers touched it, a shock wave blasted through the chamber, throwing her back. The walls screamed. Out of the pulsing veins emerged figures. Ghastly, skeletal creatures with hollow eyes and clawed hands. They swarmed toward them, howling, desperate. Oliver fought them off with wild, slashing swings of the dagger. "Get the crystal," he shouted. Amelia staggered to her feet. Ignoring the creatures, she ran to the pedestal. Summoning all her strength, she raised a heavy shard of stone from the ground and smashed it against the glass. The crystal tumbled free, landing at her feet. The chamber convulsed as though in agony. Amelia seized the crystal. At her touch, it flared black and red, and the creatures around them shrieked in unison, retreating into the walls. But the manor itself began to collapse. Massive cracks split the floor, and pieces of the ceiling rained down. "We have to get out," Oliver roared. Clutching the crystal, Amelia ran for the archway, Oliver right behind her. They sprinted up the spiral staircase, dodging falling debris, the house screaming in rage around them. Ashbourne Manor was dying, and it intended to take them with it. Amelia's heart pounded in her ears as they raced through the collapsing corridors. Ashbourne Manor was tearing itself apart, room by room. Walls cracked and crumbled into dust. Ceilings split open, raining down beams and stones. Doors slammed shut behind them, as if trying to trap them inside forever. Amelia gripped the black crystal tightly against her chest, feeling its pulse sync with her own frantic heartbeat. "Almost there!" Oliver shouted. They rounded a corner and saw it, the grand entrance hall, its enormous double doors blown wide open, revealing the misty rain-soaked moor beyond. Freedom! But between them and the exit stood the last horror. From the fractured floor rose a towering figure, a grotesque mockery of human form made of twisted roots, stone, and bone. Its hollow eyes locked onto Amelia, sensing the crystal, the guardian of the curse. It roared, the sound splitting the air, and charged toward them, massive arms swinging. "Go!" Oliver shouted, pushing Amelia forward. He raised the silver dagger, throwing himself at the monster. Amelia hesitated for one heart-wrenching second. Then she ran. The floor shook under her feet. Shards of glass and stone sliced at her as she sprinted across the ruined hall. She didn't dare look back. Behind her, she heard Oliver's battle cries, the clash of metal against bone, the bellowing fury of the beast. Then, a terrible wet crack. Silence. Tears blurred Amelia's vision as she stumbled toward the doorway. The manor roared one last time, a deafening sound of rage and despair. The black crystal in her hand burned fiercely, its heat searing her skin. Without thinking, she hurled it onto the ground just outside the threshold. The crystal shattered into 1,000 pieces. A shock wave blasted outward. Ashbourne Manor let out a final, soul-chilling scream. The walls imploded, the roof collapsed, and in moments, the manor was nothing but a pile of smoking rubble. The rain washed over Amelia as she fell to her knees on the muddy ground, gasping for breath. For a long time, she simply knelt there, unable to move, stunned by the enormity of what had happened. The crystal was destroyed. The curse was broken. Ashbourne Manor was gone. But so was Oliver. Slowly, Amelia stood, soaked and shivering. The dawn broke across the moor, casting a pale, golden light over the wreckage. Somewhere, deep in the wreckage, she thought she heard a whisper, a soft, familiar voice carried on the wind. A promise. That some bonds, even in death, are never truly broken. Without a backward glance, Amelia walked away from the ruins, the moor swallowing her figure as the morning light grew stronger. And far beneath the earth, where no eyes could see, something ancient stirred once more.